can wait.
They can do it. They've got 30 seconds, so if she said if you want to go and just start, no, I'm going to break in with you.
Okay, are you ready for today?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about Preston Burnett, our victim. He was only 29 years old. Preston was abandoned by his mother at 7. He was homeless at 17. And he's lived on the streets and with friends ever since that time. He fell into the wrong crowd. He got tied up with those low-level, nonviolent drug scene people. You know, they want to tell you they're not violent and they're not dangerous. Well, don't believe that if anyone tells you, because they are violent. Preston was in Auburndale on May the 10th, and the Auburndale police gave him a ride to the only friend's house that we know that he had. Robin Van Diver, who lived on Terry Street just outside the city of Auburndale. That was about 2:30 in the morning. We discovered him later that afternoon murdered. Our homicide detectives, which are the very best, determined over the next 2.5 weeks who murdered him. And in fact, we had to put 10 or 11 different people in jail to get to the facts. But here's who killed. Viciously killed, and I'll give you the details in just a second. First, we have Christopher Clarity, which goes by Chris. He confessed. He gave us a full confession. He admitted that he shot our victim, Preston, in the back of the head so he could still have a proper funeral. That was nice of him. And then was Jamie Garst, known as J-Mo Smooth on the street. He confessed. He made 2 recordings of the murder. Did you hear me? He recorded the murders from inside the car while Christopher fired 4 shots into the body of our victim. And here's how it all occurred. It all occurred because we found a photograph on a small keychain, and we sent it to the media. And we said, look, these 2 ladies aren't in any trouble, but we need to know who they are. And we identified them rather quickly. One of the ladies we identified was, by the way, at that time in the county jail. And she said, the other person in the picture is my mother. And I had this keychain on this little stuffed animal, and it was there at the house I was staying when I came to jail. And then we determined that J-Mo, who was her boyfriend, had apparently cleaned out the stuff after she went to jail to take it and protect it for her. That led us to J-Mo. We also determined along the way that there were other people involved, and this was all around a street drug selling operation. They sold and used methamphetamine. You know those people that want to tell you it's a low-level, nonviolent crime? Well, when our victim, Preston, was taken to Robin Van Diver's house, later that day, he was accompanied by Chris. They went over to Lakeland, where they met up with J-Mo. Christopher told J-Mo, hey, we're going to murk this guy today. And that's street slang for murder. So we had another witness that said, well, the last time I saw Preston, he left in the car with J-Mo and Chris. J-Mo then drove them over to the abandoned Skyview Golf Course. That's where they took our victim, Preston, out of the car, talked to him and said, what did we tell you we were going to do if you ever came back to the residence, meaning Robbins? What did I tell you I was going to do last time, and promptly allowed the guy to walk past him, and then he shot him 4 times in the back and the back of the head. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a hugely violent event. It all surrounds a bunch of people that use street drugs and sell street drugs. And it all started with a young man who was abandoned by his mother at 7, left on the streets at 17. He'd been to prison for grand theft and fraudulent use of personal ID. He had 3 arrests. Garst had been to Florida State Prison on 2 different occasions and had 2 different arrests. Clarity had been to state prison once, but had 12 different arrests from Tennessee to Hillsborough County to Polk County, and many of those crimes were violent crimes. The case is wrapped up. The homicide detectives did a great job, and we currently retain our 8 years without an unsolved homicide.
All 3 were ex-cons, you're saying? All 3 involved?
All 3 had been to prison.
And so why did they...
All 3 was you, because Chris said, that Robin and Mr. Poe, who actually owns the residence where they're all allowed to hang out, had told him not to come back.
What was the relationship between the victim and, was...
The victim was girlfriends and boyfriends, allegedly, with Robin Van Diver at one time. But they kind of live in a little commune. They kind of come and go. They sell their drugs. They use their meth. And Van Diver was supposed to have been a girlfriend to this fella. But once again, they kind of all lived together. And there was a falling out, and they didn't want him there. Apparently, they'd run him off before. And when the Auburndale police had trouble with our victim in downtown Auburndale, he asked to be taken back to Robin Van Diver, who was apparently his only friend in the world. And former girlfriend. And Chris lived there, Robin lived there, Pete, all the dopers came and went. And so he stayed there throughout the night from everything we can gather at this point in the investigation. And that's when Chris left with our victim, Preston, went down to Skyline Drive West, where they saw Jamie, we call J-Mo, Smooth. We smoothed him all the way to county jail for murder. And that's when Chris told J-Mo, we're going to murk this guy. They took him, went to Skyview Golf Course. We have video clips. We've recovered the gun that was used. We've recovered ammunition. We've recovered the cell phone. They were nice enough. I like the fact that Jamie Garst, or J-Mo Smooth, whichever name you like, was nice enough to do a video recording of this horrible event so that we can use that against them in court as well.
Can you explain how something as small as a keychain, it sounds like, found at the crime scene helped you crack this case?
We would have solved this case anyway. But we solved this case a lot sooner because of the television media and the social media. And the folks whose picture were there were glad to help us. They go, hey, we don't have anything to do with this murder. One girl's locked up in jail on unrelated charges. Her mother certainly had nothing to do with it. And they were more than willing to be helpful. So at the end of the day, when people tell you that these low-level, nonviolent drug offenses are low-level, nonviolent drug offenses, look them in the eye and say, quit lying to me.
What do you think about the fact that it was recorded? And it's bad enough to kill somebody, but why would you do that?
I think it's a beautiful thing. If you're going to be vicious and nasty and ugly enough to murder someone, if you'll murder them and make a video for us, we appreciate that. That makes the prosecution of the case that much easier.
What was the motivation for them to do that? To look at it?
At the end of the day, in his drug-induced mind, he thought, I'm going to take this video to show that I didn't shoot the guy. J-Mo Smooth thought he was being smooth by video recording to show that he didn't shoot the guy. And he didn't. But the fact that he drove him there, the fact that he conspired in advance, makes a beautiful case for our prosecution.
What was the nature of the victim's encounter in Auburndale that led them to drive him to the home?
We've got 2 or 3 stories about that, whether it was a disturbance or a previous fight downtown. But the police engaged him for, I think when the police engaged him, he said he'd previously been involved in a fight. I don't know what caused them to be involved with him that second, but we can tell you. And they were trying to help him out. They took him back to a friend's house.
He obviously didn't do anything to cause the Auburndale police to arrest him.
That's correct.
It was just he was involved in a fight.
And I'm not sure that the fight was right then, or if there was another disturbance, or if he was just meandering around town at 2:30 in the morning. And certainly they wanted to find him someplace to camp so that he wasn't out committing mischief. But
When they said Merc, what is that short
That-
for something? Or what?
that is, Merc is street language for murder.
But I mean, Merc as in like Mercury or Merc?
M-U-R-K. Merc. Gonna murk him.
Merc.
Like that.
So some derivation of murder.
4 times.
M-U-R-K.
Mm-hmm. Merc.
Did anyone get the tip money, the $10,000?
No one got the tip, the $10,000. You know, this is a drug-induced mine. Any one of a half dozen witnesses we found, because these guys were bragging. Oh, I killed him, I killed him, I killed him. Any one of them could have picked the phone up and called Crime Stoppers and gotten the 10 grand that ultimately they talked to us about in the first place. Thank you. We kept our money, solved their case. Bad guys in jail, murked them.
Who would steal a swan? This guy, why would you do
Are you
that?
ready to go on to the Swan? Well, I tried to separate the 2 of these because we have, you know, you've heard of missing persons, you've heard of missing cars. We got a missing swan. We need this swan back. This swan retail value, as I'm told, is about $25,000. It's made out of fiberglass. But this swan didn't go missing on its own. This swan was kidnapped, tied up in the back of a truck and driven away by a naked man. He wasn't just naked, he was buck naked. He didn't have a stitch of clothes on. He didn't even ask to borrow a feather from the swan. And the last thing we know is they disappeared from this location in Lakeland. When he was arrested a couple of days later in the truck in Hillsborough County, he once again had clothes on, but there's no evidence that our swan is close by. Now, I've got to tell you, we'd like to talk to the swan. We want to hear what the swan has to say about this, but the swan's still at large. We need the swan to be returned to the lawful owner. The swan, as I'm told, had kind of a red complexion on his head on the way because he was embarrassed that this naked man was driving him away in a stolen vehicle.
When the guy had his arms and legs chopped off by the gator, he was naked because he was taking meth, I think. And it
Right.
gets your body all hot. Was this guy on drugs?
Well, do you know he hasn't talked to us? And he won't tell us where the swan is. But we have reason to believe the swan may be in Polk County because we have found some video of him crossing into Hillsborough County with the pickup truck and no swan. You see, he appropriately, I mean, he has tied up and kidnapped the swan, taken the swan against its owner's will. This swan needs to be found. This is a lonely swan. It's not with his family anymore.
What's the background on the naked man? Is he homeless or what's his deal?
This naked man, for whatever reason, was naked, and he didn't tell us anything about that either. But he was carrying around a bucket with him. We don't know why he had the bucket in the video before he stole that, unless, of course, he was going to feed the swan. But instead of buck naked, maybe he was bucket naked. But he's bucket naked. The swan's missing. We got him back. We got the car back. We just need the swan back. Now look, folks, where are you going to hide a 5-foot tall checkered swan?
What happens if someone's harboring that swan, they're not telling you?
If someone's harboring this swan and they're not telling us, then we're going to put them in jail for harboring the swan. And we hope when we find them they have clothes on. But here's the deal. If they will simply tell us where the swan is, if they're not a co-conspirator in the bucket naked caper, we will certainly just take our swan, return it to the owner, and everybody will be happy. But we got a bucket naked thief on the loose, a bucket naked swan thief on the loose, and it's very important that we get the swan back to its owner.
Can you go over just the details of where exactly the swan is from and what time?
I could, but I'll have to read it to you because I gave you the color and the details are all written down by Carrie. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Say bucket naked swan thief quick 5 times. See you later.